Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Daniel Murphy had always been a man of routine. He woke up at the same time every day, drank his coffee while reviewing the physics lessons he'd teach, left for school promptly at 7:30 in the morning, and came home by mid-afternoon. His life was built on patterns, on certainties, on things that made sense within a predictable logic. And for a long time, he believed his marriage to Lauren followed that same path: stable, secure, reliable. Lauren was a nurse at one of the largest hospitals in Akron, a dedicated professional constantly juggling long shifts, overnight schedules, and emergencies that consumed her for hours on end. Daniel had always admired her strength, the way she handled stress, other people's pain, and the constant exhaustion that came with her job. In the early years of their marriage, they managed to meet in the middle of the chaos: late dinners, quick talks before bed, weekends that served as a refuge to reconnect what their routines kept pulling apart. But over time, something began to change. It didn't happen overnight. It was gradual. Quiet. Like a thin crack appearing in a wall that you ignore until one day you realize it's run all the way across the ceiling. Daniel noticed that Lauren started leaving for work earlier, even when her shift didn't begin until the afternoon. He noticed she took longer to come home, citing meetings, paperwork, or hospital demands. He noticed the new perfume, worn only on certain days, never on weekends at home. He noticed her phone always face down on the table, the screen lighting up for just a few seconds before she quickly locked it again. He noticed that whenever he asked about her day, her answers were vague and generic, as if read from a memorized script. He tried not to dwell on it. Tried to believe it was just the heavy workload, accumulated fatigue, job pressure. But his unease grew. And Daniel, though a rational man, could also be impulsive when something troubled him. He wasn't the type to hoard doubts for weeks, constructing theories and slowly gathering evidence. When something didn't make sense, he needed answers, and he needed them fast. It was on a Thursday night that everything began to fall apart. Lauren came home around 6, tossed her bag onto the sofa, and announced, barely looking at him, that she'd be working an extra shift that night. She said the hospital was short-staffed, that management had asked for backup, and that she wouldn't be back until the next morning. Daniel was in the kitchen making dinner and simply replied it was fine and to be careful. She went upstairs, changed clothes, came back down quickly, gave him a cold kiss on the cheek, and left. He stood there for a few seconds, wooden spoon in hand, staring at the closed door. Something inside him screamed that this wasn't right. It wasn't the first time Lauren had pulled extra shifts, but this time felt different: the rush, the coldness, the lack of eye contact. He took a deep breath, tried to convince himself he was overreacting, but the feeling remained. That's when he remembered the app. Months earlier, after Lauren complained that she felt unsafe driving alone at night, especially after long shifts, they'd decided to enable location sharing on their phones. It was a safety measure, she said, so he could track whether she was okay, whether she'd made it to the hospital, and whether she was heading home safely. Daniel had thought it was sensible and activated the feature on her phone. Since then, he rarely checked it. He'd had no reason to. He trusted her. But that night, something pushed him to open the app. He picked up his phone, unlocked the screen, opened the location app, and searched for her name. The blue dot appeared on the map, blinking softly. Daniel expected to see the marker over the hospital, downtown. But it wasn't there. Lauren's phone was stationary at a residential address in East Akron, miles away from the hospital. He frowned, pinched the screen to zoom in, and double-checked the address. Elm Street, number 847. A quiet residential neighborhood with spacious homes and well-kept lawns, far from any medical facility. He thought maybe it was a GPS glitch, an app error. But the dot stayed put, as if she'd parked and turned off the car. Daniel's stomach twisted. He tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe she'd stopped to help someone. Maybe it was a patient's house. Maybe she was picking something up before heading to the hospital. But none of those possibilities made sense. Lauren had never mentioned home visits. And even if she had, why lie about being at the hospital? He spent the night awake, checking the app every half hour. The blue dot never moved. At 11, it was still in the same spot. At midnight, still there. At 2 in the morning, unmoving. At 4, in the exact same place. Daniel couldn't sleep. He just lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling anger and anguish swell inside him like pressure about to burst. At 6 in the morning, as the sky began to lighten, he got a message from Lauren. Leaving the hospital now, it was exhausting. I'll be home in 40 minutes. Love you. Daniel read the message 3 times. Then he opened the app again. The blue dot was still on Elm Street. She hadn't left. She wasn't at the hospital. She was lying, outright, thinking he'd never find out. His hands shook as he typed his reply. He thought of several ways to confront her, but decided to be direct, no beating around the bush, no room for more lies. That's great. But did the hospital move? Because your phone spent the whole night at 847 Elm Street. He hit send and stared at the screen, waiting for a response. Minutes passed. Nothing. The message had been read, but Lauren didn't reply. Daniel got out of bed, threw on the first clothes he found, grabbed his car keys, and walked out. He didn't think twice. Didn't wait for explanations. He needed to see it with his own eyes. He needed to confront the lie face to face. He drove through Akron's empty streets, the sun rising in the distance, lighting up a city that suddenly felt foreign, as if he were in a place he didn't recognize. 20 minutes later, he reached Elm Street. He slowed as he approached number 847. It was a 2-story house with a wide porch and a car parked in the driveway, a car he didn't recognize. And next to it, Lauren's car, parked there like a silent confession. Daniel parked across the street, turned off the engine, and sat still for a few seconds, gathering courage. His heart pounded, his palms were sweaty, his breathing heavy. He knew that ringing that doorbell would change everything. There'd be no going back. But there was no running away anymore. He needed to know. He got out of the car, crossed the street, and walked to the front door. He took a deep breath, pressed the doorbell, and waited. He heard footsteps inside, someone unlocking the door. When it opened, a man appeared. He wore a light blue medical coat, a hospital ID badge clipped to his pocket. He looked to be about 40, with gray at his temples and a confused expression at seeing Daniel standing there. "Can I help you?" the man asked, polite but wary. Daniel didn't answer right away. He just stared, taking in every detail. Then, in a steady but controlled voice, he asked, "Are you Andrew, from the hospital?" The man blinked, surprised. "Yeah, who are you?" Before Daniel could respond, he heard a familiar voice from inside the house. "Andrew, who is it?" Lauren appeared behind him, wearing an oversized t-shirt that clearly wasn't hers, barefoot, her hair loose and messy. When her eyes met Daniel's, she froze. All the color drained from her face in seconds. Daniel didn't yell. Didn't gesture wildly. He just stood there, looking at them both as if watching a scene from a bad movie. "So the night shift was here," he said, his calmness edged with sarcasm. Lauren stepped forward, reaching for him. "Daniel, wait. I can explain." But he was already turning away. He didn't want to listen. Didn't need to. Everything he needed to know was right there in front of him, laid bare. She'd spent the night with another man, lied blatantly, and assumed he'd never find out. He walked back to his car, ignoring Lauren's desperate cries behind him. "Daniel, please. Come back. We need to talk." He got in the car, started the engine, and drove off without looking back. In the rearview mirror, he saw Lauren standing in the middle of the street, hands on her head, with Andrew trying to pull her back inside. But Daniel felt no pity. No doubt. Only a cold, devastating clarity. The marriage was over. And there was nothing left to say. When he got home, Daniel locked the door, went upstairs to the bedroom, and started packing Lauren's things. Clothes, shoes, beauty products, everything went into suitcases and boxes with almost mechanical precision. Every item he touched felt heavy, weighed down by memories now poisoned by lies. He didn't cry. Didn't break anything. He just carried out the task as if dismantling something that no longer worked. As he sorted through her belongings, he picked up his phone and called a lawyer a coworker had recommended months earlier during a casual conversation about divorce. At the time, Daniel had thought it odd to save the contact. Now, he was grateful he had. He explained the situation, the lie, the address, the confrontation. The lawyer listened in silence, then said firmly, "You did the right thing. We'll start the process today." Daniel hung up, took a deep breath, and kept packing. When he finished, he carried everything down to the garage, stacked the boxes neatly, and returned to the living room. He sat on the sofa, looked around, and realized the house, physically full, felt empty for the first time in years. Not in a literal sense, but emotionally. As if everything that had once been there, love, trust, partnership, had been ripped out in one swift motion. Around 10 that morning, Lauren arrived. She used her key to open the door, rushed in, and stopped short at the sight of Daniel sitting in the living room, arms crossed, silently staring at her. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "Daniel, we need to talk. Please." He didn't move. Just pointed toward the garage. "Your things are there. You have until the end of the day to take them all." Lauren shook her head desperately. "No, don't do this. I know I messed up, I know I was stupid, but we can fix this. We can go to therapy, we can." "Therapy?" he cut in, his smile bitter. "You think therapy fixes lies, Lauren? You spent the night with another man, texted me saying you were at the hospital, and thought I'd never find out. You underestimated me. And that's unforgivable to me." She tried to come closer, but he raised his hand, signaling her to stop. "Don't come near me. You lost that right." Lauren fell to her knees, sobbing loudly, pleading. "I was confused. I felt so alone, you're never home, you're always thinking about work, I needed attention." Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So the answer was to cheat? To lie straight to my face and spend the night with a coworker? You could have talked to me. Could have said you were unhappy. But you chose to do it behind my back. And now you expect me to believe you're sorry?" She gasped between sobs. "I am. I swear I am. I love you, Daniel." He shook his head, picked up her car keys from the table, and tossed them on the floor near her. "You don't love me. You love the security I gave you. You love the idea of someone waiting at home while you do whatever you want. But I'm not that person anymore. Take your things and get out of my house." Lauren stayed there, utterly broken, too weak to respond. Daniel went upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. He heard her gathering her bags, loading the boxes into her car, crying alone. And when he finally heard the front door close, he felt a strange relief, painful, but freeing. In the days that followed, Daniel blocked Lauren's number, changed the house locks, and froze all their joint bank accounts. The divorce process began immediately, and the lawyer assured him everything would be resolved quickly and definitively. Lauren tried contacting him many times, through email, calls from work, even showing up at his school, but Daniel never relented. There was nothing left to say. Meanwhile, the story spread. Andrew, the coworker Lauren had spent the night with, was married. And when his wife found out, through a friend who'd seen Lauren leaving his house that morning, hell broke loose. Humiliated and furious, Andrew's wife exposed the affair to the hospital administration, attaching evidence, statements, even photos. Management launched an internal investigation, and Andrew was suspended from his duties. Weeks later, in a discreet but final move, he was fired for conduct inconsistent with the institution's ethical standards. Lauren, in turn, began to feel the full weight of the consequences. Co-workers who once respected her now looked at her with contempt. Whispers followed her down the hallways. No one invited her to lunch anymore, no one struck up conversation. She became a ghost in her own workplace. And when management announced a restructuring in her department, Lauren was among the first to be reassigned, a polite euphemism for a quiet firing. She couldn't hold on to her position and, months later, resigned. Daniel, on the other hand, moved forward. He sold the house he'd shared with Lauren, he couldn't look at it anymore without remembering the betrayal, and moved into a smaller, simpler, more practical apartment. He threw himself into his work, picked up old hobbies he'd abandoned, and started seeing friends he hadn't seen in years. Gradually, the pain gave way to a sense of lightness. As if, by letting go of Lauren, he'd also shed a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. Months passed. Life moved on, as it always does. Daniel never asked about Lauren, never inquired after her, never wanted to hear gossip. To him, she simply ceased to exist. It was as if those 8 years of marriage had been erased, replaced by a painful but necessary clarity. One Saturday afternoon, while having coffee at a downtown Akron bakery, Daniel ran into an old friend. They chatted about life, work, future plans. Then, hesitantly, the friend asked, "Man, did you hear about Lauren?" Daniel frowned. "Hear what?" The friend hesitated, unsure if he should go on. But Daniel insisted. "Go ahead. She's not doing well. Lost her job, living in a tiny apartment on the outskirts. And Andrew, the guy, just vanished from her life. As soon as he lost his job, he blocked her everywhere. Wants nothing to do with her." Daniel fell silent, absorbing the news. He felt no pity. No satisfaction. Just a cold, unavoidable realization. Yeah, life collects its dues. His friend nodded. And it collects them right. They changed the subject, talked about other things, laughed over old stories. But when the friend left, Daniel stayed there alone, looking out the bakery window at people passing by. He thought of Lauren, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a distant kind of pity, as if she were a stranger he'd met long ago. She'd chosen lies. Chosen betrayal. Chosen to put her own desires above the commitment they'd made to each other. And now, she was paying the price, all alone, unemployed, abandoned by Andrew, abandoned by Daniel, left with nothing but the consequences of her own choices. Daniel finished his coffee, paid the bill, and walked out. The autumn sun shone brightly that afternoon, but he felt light. Because he'd learned something essential: trust isn't something you rebuild. Once it breaks, it's gone for good. And trying to glue the pieces back together only prolongs the pain. Weeks later, while sorting through old papers at home, Daniel found a wedding photo of the two of them. Lauren smiled radiantly, holding her bouquet. He stood beside her, happy, believing that moment marked the beginning of a lifetime together. He stared at the photo for a few seconds, feeling nothing. Then he tore it in half, threw it in the trash, and moved on. Because GPS doesn't lie. People do. And Daniel had learned, through the most painful way possible, to trust technology more than her words. And that lesson, however bitter, had been the key to his freedom. On an ordinary Sunday, Daniel was at the grocery store, pushing his cart down the aisles, when he saw her. Lauren stood in the cleaning supplies aisle, staring at the shelves as if lost. She was thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back carelessly. She wore simple clothes, stripped of the glow she once had. She looked smaller, more fragile, as if life had taken everything that once made her seem invincible. She didn't see him at first. Daniel thought about turning down another aisle, avoiding the encounter. But in that moment, he realized he didn't need to run. He felt no anger. No pain. Just indifference. And in a way, that was the greatest victory of all. Lauren finally looked his way and froze. Her eyes widened, her breath seemed to catch. She left her cart and took a hesitant step toward him. Daniel. He stopped, looked at her calmly, and simply nodded. Lauren. She tried to smile, but it came out shaky, forced. How are you? Good, he replied, plain and direct. And you? She swallowed hard, looked away. I'm surviving. Daniel nodded, saying nothing more. The silence between them was heavy, full of unsaid things, of regrets and hurts that would never be resolved. Lauren seemed to want to say more, maybe apologize again, maybe try to reopen a door that had long been locked and sealed. But Daniel gave her no opening. Take care of yourself, Lauren. He walked on, pushing his cart, without looking back. He heard her whisper something, maybe a, you too, but he wasn't sure. And it didn't matter. Because as he passed her in that grocery aisle, Daniel realized he'd moved on. He'd gone forward. His life no longer had room for the past. Lauren stood there, watching him leave, feeling the crushing weight of everything she'd lost, the husband who loved her, the home they'd shared, the stable life she'd thrown away. All for one night. One lie. One selfish choice that had seemed harmless at the time. Daniel left the store, loaded his groceries into the car, and drove home. When he arrived, he put everything away, sat on the sofa, and looked around. The apartment was simple, but it was his. Every object had been chosen by him, every decision made without having to consult anyone. And for the first time in a long while, he felt whole, not because he'd found someone new, but because he'd found himself again. The message was clear, forever etched into his memory as a lesson he'd never forget: trust is a gift. And once it's broken, no excuse, no therapy, no second chance can rebuild it. All that remains is the raw, unfiltered truth: some choices can't be undone. And the greatest triumph after betrayal isn't revenge. It's the ability to stand up, move forward, and never again let someone underestimate you. And so, while Lauren bore the weight of her own choices, Daniel walked free, light, unburdened, at peace. Because he'd learned that the greatest act of self-love is knowing when it's time to walk away. And he'd walked away at just the right moment. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.